Okay, and finally, I'm going to go over the basic workflow for baking a map in MightyBake, kind of from start to finish. This is probably how most of your projects will end up, if you're a Maya user anyways. Okay, so you've got your high poly in Maya. So this is a model that I built a long time ago now, actually. It was a sub-D model or a smooth mesh preview in Maya. Currently, MightyBake does not support sub-D natively, so you will need to take your high poly and go modify, convert smooth mesh polygons. Oh, sorry, smooth mesh preview to polygons. So these are actual, like, this is a, it's a low poly model with a lot of vertices. It's not a live sub-D model, smooth model. It's marked up all weird just so you guys can see the material ID baking as well. How the material ID baking works is whatever is on your high poly in terms of materials is those colors will just get written out like as a solid fill or whatever. So if you looked at this mode, this model in flat lit mode, that's the color that it will write out. It won't capture any of this shading information. It'll just give you the solid fill of whatever the material is applied. So I just applied some blend shaders to arbitrary faces just for a test. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to select your high poly. So select all that. And then export the high. Click the high button in the MightyBake shelf. And pick a folder for it here. Okay, so I'm just going to call this high for our test. Just makes it easier. So export the high. There, it's done. Then I'm going to hide the high. I'm going to show the low. So here's my low poly model. Oh, it's got a normal map on it. I ruined the surprise. Let me just put a blend shader on it to make this more fun. Okay, so there's my low poly model. It's a combination of hard edges, n-gons, tris, quads, and soft edges, so it's all over the place again. The exploded method is supported in MightyBake, so I've got 2 keyframes here which separate these meshes because I don't want them to write normal maps onto themselves. You can see there, you can see it better. So you can totally have transforms and everything, and you just have to have it in the keyframe state that you want to bake at. So I want to bake the exploded one. So select that stuff and click the low button. Like I mentioned in the previous videos, it's imperative that you use the low button. The high button and the envelope button are just there for convenience more so, but you must use the low button if you want to get a clean bake, especially in Maya. So you click the low, and we will just call it low to make this easy. We go low, there it's done, there it exported the low. And then I'll show the envelope as well. And as mentioned previously, the shape of the envelope doesn't actually matter. It's just a blocking mechanism for any of the kind of the convex shapes. So here's a good example, a good real world example of where you would need an envelope, because here's the envelope there. Because these surfaces will project onto each other, the distance between here and here is too small, so it's going to shoot a ray out and it's going to capture this surface and bring it back and project it here, which you don't want. So with the envelope, what it'll do is it'll start the ray shooting out here, it'll hit the envelope, stop, and then turn around. So it'll just capture the high poly. It won't capture the other side of the high poly. So to make this envelope, I just duplicated my low poly mesh and used the transform component to just like balloon it out a little bit. And same thing with this. I did it in the keyframe state, obviously, because if I did it like this, it wouldn't help. So it's got to be lined up with your mesh. So I will select the envelope, and I'll click the ENV, which stands for envelope, and I'll just export that guy. And there, I'm done. I'm ready to bake. So let me just hide those. And turn that on and go over to MightyBake. So launch MightyBake. And I'll just make a new preset so we can go through it almost like a quick start guide. So you go new. You don't have to make it preset. You can just use the default, but then it'll get overwritten. So video tutorial. And browse for the high poly. So I did make a shortcut. MightyBake tests. So hi, and then browse for the envelope. Everyone on the forum will be happy to know it now remembers the last folder that you went to, so I didn't have to, like, I put the hi in once, and then when I clicked on the envelope, it takes you to the same folder, which was, I think, annoying a lot of people. So envelope, and then browse the low. There's the low. Normal map, we want to see it in Maya. Obviously, we'll just do a test bake, so everything default there, and then output settings, browse to the same folder, and we will call this video tutorial. And there you go, see it's written the folder. I think we shall bake this at, I don't know, let's just do 4K, why fuck around. Dilation at 0, TIFF 16-bit, furthest, source distance 0, which means infinite. So that's all good to go. We want geometry normals because this is a mixture of hard and soft edges. And let's bake it and see what happens. So here we go. So at preview settings, it looks like it took 3 seconds to bake the 4K map. So click close. Okay, so we've got a map, so let's plug it into our blend shader and see what it looks like. Let's graph this mofo. Make a bump map. Let's do file node because I don't care, it's not a PSD. And MightyBake tests. Let's do, okay, video tutorial. So you'll note here it appends the name that you put in the output settings. So we got video tutorial TNM, which stands for tangent normal map, I think. And then Maya, because we baked a Maya style map. And then video tutorial _ object space map. So as stated in the previous videos, you get the object space map for free at no extra cost to the bake time, which is really cool. So we'll plug in the tangent space map. And get that out of the way. And there we go. So obviously this stuff's kind of jaggy in here because we baked at preview settings. But it's super powerful to be able to bake a 4K map in 6 seconds or whatever it took to do previews, and then when you're happy you can bake the final result here. So I'll just disable this temporarily just for fun. So you can see the before and after. That's the before. And that's just the low poly. So that's the low poly, and there's with the normal map applied. And then let's get some area that's kind of ugly. This is actually probably a pretty good area. It's all jaggy here. So we'll rebake the map in MightyBake. Now, we're happy with the bake. Let's say we've iterated on it all day, assigning hard and soft edges and adding edge loops or removing edge loops or whatever, or fixing up the high and low, or re-UV mapping it or something. So now we're ready to bake at kind of production quality settings. So we'll go 4x4 anti-aliasing and 3 pixel Gaussian blur, because that's the same bake as what you would get in Maya with production quality settings. And we'll click bake. Actually, I'll move that over to the side there. So it's obviously going to bake slower because I think when you set it to 4x4, it's rendering like something crazy like a 16K map or something like that. 4 times 4096. So yeah, it's baking. You can see it updating in real time. And it should just, I have my Maya to auto update textures, so it's overwriting the existing file. So we should just see this area get cleaned up, the anti-aliasing, with the better filtering settings. So just wait a couple seconds here. It's pretty cool. You don't have to stop the video because it bakes so fast. And there you go. So you can see it's all nice and cleaned up there. Looks like it took 39 seconds to do the bake, and it took 2 seconds to write the file. So this stuff's all much cleaner in there. And then you could still go to, if you wanted to go even higher, you can go to 8 times. That'll be a bit slower. And I find for most cases it's not really necessary. It doesn't add a ton of value. It's definitely not worth the speed versus cost, but it's not that much slower. So I mean, if you want to do it, go for it. So we got all the nice normal details here. Stuff's all cleaned up. It's all good there. And now I want to show you the iteration loop, because it's awesome to bake, you know, one map or whatever, but that's not really realistic to how you'd actually be using the software. What's important to me anyways is being able to iterate like 10,000 times in a minute or in an hour or whatever, multiple times constantly, because you know, for the most part I find normal map baking to be somewhat trial and error. Even if you know all the secret tricks and everything, there's still some cases where you're like, oh fuck, I need to harden that edge. Oh, I got to go back and rebake it. Oh, I got to re-export all my stuff or whatever. So let's intentionally break something, and then we'll go and we'll intentionally fix it. So like, here's some stuff here that was like, I've clearly assigned hard edges because I couldn't get it to work correctly with the soft edges. So let's just pretend that I started my model with soft edges here, which I actually did, because my general workflow is soften all the edges first, bake it in MightyBake, look for the errors, and then harden edges kind of one at a time where you see the errors that can't be fixed. Harden those edges, and then also separate the UV shell where you harden those edges, and then rebake. See if the problem goes away. So I've got all soft edges here. As you can see, the normal map's also all fucked up because it was baked with the different gradation in it. So all you have to do, because for the most part you're iterating on the low poly all day, not really the high poly, you just click the low button again and just overwrite the low. And it exports, and we'll go back here, look at this screwed up area, and then let's just rebake. I should have turned off the production quality settings, but it doesn't really matter because it bakes so fast. The really cool thing is, because of the way the envelopes work in MightyBake, I don't need to re-export the envelope. So even though I've changed even topology, I could change in the low poly, and I wouldn't need to re-export the envelope. So that is like a huge time saver alone. Almost done here. Just move this off to the side so you can see the pop. There we go. So it's updated and it's cool. It fixed some stuff, but then see here I got some like crappy shading error, and that's because it just, I don't know, it just can't bake across that edge without me hardening it in the low poly. So we'll iterate one more time. Let's pretend I went in and I, you know, hardened the edges appropriately, which is what I did. I hardened all these edges and I hardened these, and it looks like maybe I didn't even need to harden those. But I hardened all these edges to get a clean bake, and so let's just iterate it again. So I think I've fixed those. I'm pretending that I think I fixed those by hardening the edges, and I want to just try it again and rebake it. So you just click the low button, export the low, and then you know, for me, I don't do the previews at 4x4. I just do the previews at 1x1, so it'll bake in like a couple seconds, so you can test it. Test where the shading breaks. And there you go. So we're back to normal, so it's all good. Looks like I need to dilate it there to fix that little guy. So that's the basic workflow for MightyBake. I mean, you export your high, and then you export your envelope, and then you really just iterate on the low, or that's how I do it anyways, because it's so fast to just keep exporting the low, do a little tweak, export the low, rebake, look at it, do a little tweak, export the low, bake it, look at it, or whatever, over and over again. And so just for fun, just because MightyBake's so fast, to kind of end off this little demonstration, let's just go crazy and let's bake a 8K map and see what that looks like. I'll bake it at preview settings, then we'll bake it again at production quality settings. So an 8K map at preview settings, you can see it's like you could actually physically preview 8K maps over and over again all day, which is kind of crazy. We'll see how long it takes to do the final bake and writing the file. The file writing will probably take longer than the bake actually, because writing the TIFF or whatever with so many pixels in it, yeah, you can see it's kind of like, there we go. So it took 13 seconds to do the bake and took 13 seconds to write the file. And so here's the 8K map, which is like, it totally doesn't look any better to me. So maybe there's something to be said for that's like overkill resolution, but that's the 8K map on it. And then, yeah, I mean, I guess it cleaned up this area. This area got a lot tighter, even without any anti-aliasing turned on. That's a pretty crisp edge. And then we'll bake one final map just to test it. We'll see what happens. See if these areas get like nice or whatever. Let's do an 8K map at 4x4 sampling. So 4 times 8192. And let's bake it and see how long it takes. So obviously substantially slower, but you can see how fast it's animated. I could still sit here and watch it and not want to kill myself because it's still relatively fast, even at 8K production quality settings. To not waste your guys' time, I'll just skip the video forward ahead for this one because this is like the mega map. And when it's done, I'll just tell you how long it takes to bake, or actually the software will tell you how long it took to bake it. Okay, and it's done. It looks like the bake took 2 minutes and 30 seconds, so pretty good for an 8K map at 4 times anti-aliasing. Looks like it took 13 seconds to write the file, so you can see it's all pretty sweet in there, pretty cleaned up. I think for this model it's a total waste because like the edges are all pretty soft. There's not a lot of like noisy detail, so probably this map would have been good at like 2K or 4K. And then finally I will bake a couple of the other maps. So here, let's make this not crazy anymore. And to not waste anyone's time, I will set it just to 2K for demonstration purposes. So we'll do the normal map, and then we'll add another map in here by pressing the plus icon. And we'll do let's do an AO map just at low quality settings. That shouldn't take too long. And we'll also do the material ID map, which is baked from the material assignments on the high poly that we exported. I won't bake the layers or whatever, so we'll just bake all 3 all at the same time, and then we'll apply them to the model or whatever. So let's do it, bake it. So it'll go through the normal map, it'll take like 0 time. Here it's going through the AO bake. Also super fast for preview settings. I think this is probably the fastest AO bake on the market. And then obviously the material ID map takes no time. Okay, surface shader, out color, file. So AO, video tutorial AO TIFF. So there you go, there's the low quality AO. It's pretty good quality. This is because I didn't dilate the map, so that'll go away if you just dilate it. In fact, because it's so fast to bake, why don't we just update that in real time? Just untick this guy and untick this guy. I'll just leave them in there, and we'll just set the dilation to like 16 or something. We'll just rebake the AO just as a test. The AO is pretty good quality even for the preview bake, given how fast it renders. And there we go, all fixed up, nice and clean. Noisy, looks like fuzzy or something. And then down here I'll make another surface shader, and then we can look at the material ID map that came out from the high poly. File, browse, and video tutorial mat. And there we go. Oh, and same thing there. It's not dilated, so you get the little black edge where the bilinear filtering is bleeding between the 2 pixels. So it works on a per face assignment, which is cool as well. Well, I mean, I guess it has to, or else it's kind of useless. And then we'll just fix that up as well. Why not? That one will bake even faster. Just rebake that guy to get rid of those black edges. And there you go. It's fixed. So that's the end of the video tutorial. I hope this tutorial helps some people get out on PolyCount, get on the forum, get your feature requests and bug reports in, be a good corporate citizen and buy a license so the MightyBake guy can keep developing the software and make it the best baking software for games. Thanks a lot.